I'm honored to be here. I've seen the list of some of your previous speakers, and I'm fortunate and pleased to be among the folks that you've had here. Westerville's my home. I live 5 minutes from here. It's an awesome drive this morning, rather than going downtown. And Westerville is the community where I raised my family. My kids all went to school here, so this is a great place. So a few things I thought we might do this morning, and then we'll take a few questions, and then questions from the audience too, if you like. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing is off limits. So if I can't answer it, I'll tell you. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about Ohio Health. I don't know how much you know about us. I've been there for 34 years, and been in this job for 15. And so we're obviously proud of it, proud of the folks that work here. So I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about our organization. And I thought I'd share a little bit about how we run the business. It is a business. We have a mission of caring for folks and their families, but it's still a business. I thought I'd share a little bit about that. And then whatever I can offer around the issue of leadership, I will share that also. And then we'll take questions. So, a little bit about Ohio Health. This is what grounds us. Our mission is to improve the health of those we serve. It's been that as long as I've been there, 34 years. Now, how I feel about that and what that means to me and our folks, I think it's changing a little bit. I think it's moving a little bit from the care of the sick and injured to the thought of prevention and wellness. And that's a refreshing new thought. I think as healthcare, and that is kind of at the core of where healthcare is moving today, from just fixing you to caring for you when you're well as well, and keeping you there. Because the notion of just the care of the sick and injured is an expensive proposition that I think society anywhere can no longer afford to be confined to that mission. Second thing is our vision. And this is probably 14, 15 years old, and it's how it works. I don't know if you can read that. Dave, are you able to read that? That's good. And it starts like this, because we want to be the place where people want to work, and then where physicians practice, and then where people want to go when they need healthcare services. It's got to go in that order. You have to be a place where people want to work. If you're in the service business, well, really any business, but particular service business, you got to have the right folks. And if you have the right folks working there with the right attitude, the physicians want to work with them because we're helping take care of their patients, and then that's where patients go. And that's kind of driven us over all these years. And then you can see our values, and those are alive and well. A couple years ago, we defined those with behaviors. So someone can call me out if I'm not living a certain value, because those behaviors are known to all of us. I could talk about that for a long time, but I won't. But being values-driven is an important attribute for any organization. Here's who we are. We have about 28,000 people in the family. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think this says 21,000 associates. I think we're about 22,500. Physicians, volunteers play a very, very important role in our organization. And you can see on the right just a few stats about activity. We're a big organization, and that's something that we take seriously, because about almost 50% of everyone who gets health care in this market come to us, and that is a huge responsibility. This is where we are. Over the last few years, we've become a lot more regional in nature. We have a service area that's about 44 counties out of the 88. These are where our hospitals are. I was told yesterday, I know this, we have 1,000 different locations. That I didn't even know that one. And that's where those 22,500 people work. The regional hospitals is relatively new thing for us to the scale we are. And what's starting to happen in regions, that to be in the hospital this day, you got to be really sick. I mean, you got to be really sick to be in the hospital and not just be an outpatient, right? You've seen that with your family and friends. Well, if you're in a community of 20,000 people, the number of people who really need hospital services these days are a lot different than they were in the 1950s and 60s when most of those hospitals were built. If you're going to be in the hospital and really sick, you got to have the right specialist and the right technology to care for you in that situation. And in smaller communities, they can no longer afford to have all that. There aren't enough folks to do that. There are not enough population to draw the physicians to those communities. So they're reaching out looking for help. And I spend a whole lot of time on that notion right now, talking to boards of directors in those communities that are starting to struggle with what healthcare in their community is really going to mean in the future. And that's a hard thing for those boards to think about. I mean, Dave, you're on the board here, and so you got a board member in a community who's on the board because they want to give back to the community. They're volunteers. They might be the bank president or a lawyer, and now they're thinking, really, on my watch, I got to make the decision what to do with this institution that's been here for almost 100 years? And that's the nature of the business we're in. Do I think it's bad? Not necessarily. I just think technology and practice and science has evolved to such a place where folks can get cared for in an outpatient setting. So our business plan is to connect with those institutions that make sense, help those communities become all they can be, and then if patients need something more, then bring it to Ohio Health. That's our business plan. Don't tell anybody. Proud of the organization, a few recognitions for the organization. We're in the top 15 health systems in the country from a quality and efficiency standpoint. If you look at the big systems, we're in the top 5. Physician, you see that 97th percentile physician satisfaction? Remember I said to be the place where people want to work, physicians want to. So we have a benchmark group of about 38 institutions like us around the country. We do a survey of the doctors every year, and we're always number 1 or 2 in the country, which is something I'm proud of. Physicians want to work with us. They find it professionally satisfying. They can get the work done. They got good nurses, and they like it. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we've been in the Fortune magazine's top 100 best places to work for 10 years in a row. During that time, our number of employees went from 10,000 to 22,500. I feel really good about the fact we've been able to keep the culture we have of engagement of our associates for 10 years in a row while we've doubled the number of employees. I will come back to this thought. We operate the business with a balanced scorecard. I could talk about this. It's kind of a Harvard business case. But the balanced scorecard is a way that we align everybody in the organization around what's important. So for those of us who have incentive compensation, a huge chunk of my compensation is based on 4 numbers. Donna, a huge chunk of her compensation is based on 4. Every person in the organization has part of his or her compensation aligned on 4 numbers. So the housekeeper on 7 North working nights at Riverside has his or her compensation somewhat leveraged based on how well we do in quality, service, culture, and finances. So the recognitions and awards I showed you on the previous slide come to life nationally with recognition through this kind of focus. So there's a lot behind all these numbers, but I think the point is everyone in the organization has to know what's important, what's really important. And we can map almost everything we do, whether it's growth or a quality initiative or a new network of outpatient centers, to the balanced scorecard. I'll leave it at that. And then community benefit. We're a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Every year we have to file a 990, which is an IRS form that justifies our tax exempt status. And there is a national standard as to how you measure that, because the government wants to make sure you're doing your part to earn your tax exempt status. And we do a calculation of what we would have paid in taxes if we were for-profit versus what we contribute to the community as a not-for-profit. And every year we're usually $80 or $90 million more on the not-for-profit side. But there's a couple numbers on here that I want to mention to you. And one is that $63.8 million of charity care. See that number up there? Those are people who never even get a bill. Healthcare is expensive. It's too expensive. We have a fairly rich charity care policy in this community. We have agreed years ago among all the institutions in town to have a similar charity care policy. And one of our cardinal values is honoring the dignity and the worth of every human being, not just during the care process, but post. And this is something that we are still struggling with. But $63.8 million for us is twice what everyone else does in town combined. And that's something that we are proud of being able to do. So a little bit on leadership. I know this might look a little corny, but it's really how we think about things and how we operate and lead the organization. How we lead the organization, I guess, not operate it. So it's about hands, heads, and hearts. What am I talking about? So when I think about hands, I think about having the right people to do the jobs. Are they competent? Are they skilled? Are we a preferred employer in town? Do we get the best of the best? And if you're able to do that, then how do you develop those folks? Everyone in an organization, almost everyone in an organization has a development plan. I do, and I tell my staff what it is. What do I need to work on next year to be a better leader? So that's the hands. Do you have the hands that can do the job? Last year we had 70,000 people apply for 2,500 jobs. I feel pretty good about that. And then those that we have, we've worked to make them better leaders. This year we're rolling out lean training to 1,200 leaders, 1,200 leaders, Lisa? 1,200 leaders, teaching them lean. We're giving them a new skill set to help us with this transformation of healthcare that we're in the middle of. We can't do it at the senior level. We need everyone to help us. So we need to really give those hands the ability to use them. Second notion is hearts, is heads. How do we engage people in what's important? The balanced scorecard helps. We have a leadership meeting, 1,200 people, 2 or 3 times a year, where it's all about strategy and performance, and we just talk about what it is that we're trying to get done. Get everyone heads in the game, what it is we're trying to do. How do you get alignment in the organization? To me, that's really the most important thing. How do you get alignment in the organization? Everyone focused on the same thing. We have a lot of tools to measure that. We have goal deployment and a bunch of other tools that we all use to make sure that the alignment of our heads are there. I think most organizations do those two things. I think a lot of organizations misses the hearts. Because if you get those two things, and then you get people's hearts, you get their passions, you get them lit up, you get them focused, you get everything out of them, then you really got something special. That's what transforms the organization, is having their hearts. How do you do that? Recognition, both publicly, on a grand scale, which we do a few times a year. Personally, I have a goal of writing 5 to 6 thank you notes every single week. It's Tuesday. I didn't do one yesterday. But I've got a couple folks that help me with that, Susan. You have to have a system to do that, because if you're not, otherwise it's just too easy Friday to say, oh shoot, I forgot, right? We're all busy. So it's whatever you can do as a leader that instills loyalty, passion, appreciation, It's the emotional side of leadership. So if you get their hands, heads, and hearts, that's when the organization really starts to thrive. So leadership is a never-ending journey. I'll quit here in a second. We have a doctor in our organization, Phil. You know, I know Phil. He's been a kind of a cantankerous surgeon most of his life. Kind of a pain in the backside for a lot of years. And then he became, he couldn't do surgery anymore while he was in his 40s, late 40s. And he didn't know what to do. We kind of recognized in him an ability to deal with people in a very effective way. He's a very engaging guy. The hearts part, he's got down pat. Heads part, he's still learning. And we gave him increasing responsibilities over time. And man, did he grow fast. He grew so fast. And so about a year ago, he was saying, Dave, you know, I went to medical school and I was top of my class and did my residency and I did well and opened up a surgical practice, and after 4 or 5 years he said, I got this down. He said, when do you ever feel like that when you're a leader? I said, Phil, you never do. You never do. It is a never-ending journey. And so, you know, the fact that you all are here, I appreciate whatever I can add to that for the students. You never really get there. There's too many changing variables. Times change, people change, and leadership is a never-ending journey and something I work at every single day. And there are days I feel like we got it, and there are days I feel like I don't. But surrounding yourself with people that share that vision makes it all worthwhile. What I receive greatest, what keeps me coming back is watching leaders lead, watching the organization thrive under leaders. It's no longer the tasks. And that's, I think, the journey that a leader is on. So with that, I'll stop and take whatever questions you might have.
I have a few,
Okay,
so
good.
you want to come over and sit down
Yep.
quickly? We're going to do kind of the
Where do you
Oprah
want me?
style,
Where do you want me here?
the one on the right,
Okay.
if you don't mind. Can you hear me? Yeah, well, thank you for coming. You were very popular. We usually meet in a smaller room over in Roush. So and within 12 hours, we had overcapacity for that room. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
We appreciate it from the Ross leadership, and I know from Otterbein. So I just have a few questions I thought I'd ask you. When it comes to the hands and the heads and the hearts, do you think one of those is harder to master than the other? I think you kind of just spoke to that a little bit.
I think it depends on the individual. Phil is still learning the heads part. He's got the hearts down pat. But I think as an organization, from an organizational perspective, I think what's hardest to do is the hearts part. So here's an example. When we look at our compensation system, obviously you want to maintain competitive compensation. You don't want to be a market leader. You don't want to be a market follower. There's no sense paying more than you need to. But when we look at compensation and benchmark, I take our market leading position and add 1.5%. And that's for recognition, rewards, special things that we do that I don't want to ever lose as we establish compensation. And having that discipline during tough times is hard to do. But when you really need people's hearts the most is in tough times, or in times of transition. So I think for organizations, the hardest part to learn and to sustain is the hearts part.
What about growth? How do you handle growth? You obviously have doubled employees in the last,
10 years? 10 years?
Yes. I mean, how do you handle that growth? You talked about, you're still, through those years, you're still ranked as one of the top, places to work.
It's all those things.
It's all those
It's all those things. As I think about any of the challenges we have, I kind of mentally go through that process. Because if you mentally go through that process, you kind of tick off what is it that you need to do. So as you have we acquired a pretty good sized hospital in Mansfield. How long ago was that, Donna? 2 years? 2 years ago. And we went through that, didn't we? We kind of ticked it off. And how do you integrate the culture? I mean, those folks were scared to death of what was going to happen. And I was a little scared to death. This is 2,200 new employees that we got to bring on. If you kind of mentally tick through that list in a way that's from our shoes and their shoes, you tend to find the ground that you need to be on.
Great. One of the things you talked about was your own professional development and how you share that with those you work with and some of the things that you are working on. How important is that as a team, as a whole, to understand you actually say, this is what you're going to get as me as a leader?
It took me a long time to learn to be vulnerable. It took me a long time. How do you admit when you don't know? How do you admit what you're weak in? How do you share what you're trying to grow, what you're trying to do to grow as a leader with the folks that work with you? I mean, how better to make progress if you tell people what you're trying to make progress on so they can give you feedback? That's not always fun. It's painful. But it's something that we do as an organization. I think we do it relatively well. I mean, I'll let Donna or somebody speak to that if they want to. But I think that the growth as a leader, I start every day, 7 days a week, 365, with a morning reading that I do on leadership. Every day. I did today.
We can help you with that. Ross Leadership actually has a leadership minute that we send out every day. I'm pretty sure you're on the list.
I'm not.
You're not? You will be now.
I understand that. But it's just the thought for the day. And this issue that you never ever get there compels me to, what is it I can work on today? What is it I can do today to be able? Now sometimes by the time I get to work, it's gone. Other times, it's there.
So practicing your leadership
Absolutely.
is extremely important, and you do it openly.
I do.
As well.
I try to.
You try to. We do have a lot of students in the room. Can you talk a little bit about mentoring and how important that is, not only to mentor people, but also to have a mentor?
So there's nothing I've ever accomplished significant in my work life that wasn't as a result of some mentoring opportunity. And that was one of the pieces of advice I got when I was in college. And a guy named Ed Mansfield, David would remember, was the CEO of Riverside Methodist Hospital. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my professional life in 1970s, really. In 1975, 6, and I worked for a lady who was Ed's wife. And I rode my bicycle over to Riverside, and he said, "You ought to be a hospital administrator." I said, "What's that?" And he set up appointments for me at Harding Hospital, at OSU, and one other, I can't remember. And I went to see those folks. And then Ed said, "I want you to come back and talk to me." And I did. And the next thing I knew, I was in grad school, and I stayed in contact with Ed, for years and years. So when I was even in graduate school, doing a fellowship, my first job, I wrote Ed a letter every quarter. Sometimes it was a paragraph, sometimes it was two or three pages, letting him know what I was doing. And one day in November of 1982, Ed calls me and said, "Dave," he was still at Riverside, and he said, "Dave, we just decided to manage a hospital in rural Ohio. There's no one here that knows anything about small hospitals or small towns. You do," because I told him what I was doing through these letters. And at the age of 28, he hired me to run this little hospital. And then I still stayed in contact with him until he passed. And so it became a very special relationship for 20 years. And so anyway, I could go on about Ed, but he ended up having his funeral at Susan H. Edwards Auditorium at Riverside, and he asked me to actually conduct his funeral, which I did. And then I always have a list of mentors. I can give you names. I'm not going to tell you, but I could give you names of 3 or 4 people now that I consider my mentors. They don't know it,
Right.
but I pay a lot of attention.
You don't actually say, you don't walk up to someone and say, will you be my mentor?
I have done that.
You have done that. And it's worked?
Yeah, I've done that. And there are 2 people in our organization who have asked me to do that now. And I meet with them once a month. So the issues of mentors are really important, as long as you set the ground rules for direct feedback. I couldn't give any student any better advice as to find your mentors. Find your mentors.
And more than one?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, that's very important. Do you have a story about someone that you've mentored and their growth? Because I also think it's important not only to have a mentor, but also I think you learn almost as much being a mentor.
I could tell you about them. I won't tell you who they are.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that would breach confidence. But there was a physician here in town that I knew that just got burned out on his practice, and he wanted to get into the drug trial research business. And he was in it, and he was doing okay, but he wanted to grow, because he was just working day and night. And he didn't know how to expand his business. So we had a lot of leadership conversations. I told him, you're going to have to let go a little bit, bud. And you're going to have to hire some people that are better than you in whatever that is. He said, well, I can't afford it. I said, you can't afford not to. So we kind of worked through the financials and worked through the leadership and worked through his own insecurity. And today he's got 150 employees. He's doing drug trials all over the country. And we quit having our mentoring meetings, because I think those need to change. I think your mentors need to change over time. I mean, what I learned from Ed, God rest his soul, is a lot different than the folks that I pay attention to now.
So, in talking about characteristics of a leader, or some of the values, what is it when you're putting together a team? What is it that you're looking for exactly? What kind of?
So the folks that I get involved with hiring now are generally senior leaders. So I can best deal with that. We've got a couple people here that can talk about what they look for, because they're wonderful at it. I have to assume competence. By the time that I start looking for them, I got to assume they're competent. And I haven't had to let anybody go or make a significant transition for issue of just being competent for years. What fails is a cultural fit. And that's all values-based. It's all about values-based. You know, being a servant leader, putting the organization first, being humble, integrity makes or breaks you. Those are the issues that I look for, and I think those are the most significant derailers for a person, because you can learn the technical stuff, but if you don't execute in the right way, it just doesn't work. You're not able to use those skills. There's a great book I would suggest you read called Grit. I'd like to have the author for you, but I don't remember. But it talks a lot about development of people. And it was affirming to me that that's kind of how I thought. I guess that's why I liked it. But it's about perseverance and grit and values that helps a first person advance. And that makes up for a lot of skill-based competencies you may or may not have.
That brings me a thought of the last question, then we'll open it up to the audience, and I'll come down and do the Vanna White. I'll be over in Vanna White this morning. You talk about this grit, and obviously in your organization you have many different generations. You know, the millennials. Now actually probably you have some maybe even what's being called Gen Z, which are the really young ones at this point.
We have a new
We have a new
one.
generation.
No.
called Gen Z. I'll send you the link. Isn't that really, that's scary.
Yeah, I
You have
know.
the Gen Xers, you've got the baby boomers, and I'm sure you probably, in your line still, may even have some of the silent majority as well. So how do you deal with all of those? What differences do you see in all of them? And do you see it in healthcare?
Yeah, we do, don't we? I got 3 kids that are in that category. You know, work-life balance is really important to them. So when we've got, I think it's most apparent for me with our physicians. You know, you used to have these entrepreneurial, I'm trying to think of the right adjectives that won't get me in trouble. Hard-working, bigger-than-life physicians that would just work day and night. And now, for every one of those people you lose, you have to hire 2.
Yeah. Call that they live to work.
Yep. And so I think that is a big difference. And as a result, our physician complement are moving from independent physicians to employed physicians. We got about, 700 some now? And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because this issue of alignment I was talking about, the millennials want to be aligned because they're able to see and accomplish things bigger than what they could imagine if they were on their own. And that purpose in life and their career, and aligning that with that of the organization is something that they want, as opposed to the older generation, which was all about maximizing their business. And that's been a transition that, as an organization, we've had to make. We were a little slow on the uptake on that. I think we're doing a good job of that now. But it's this ability to be part of something bigger and better that contributes to society that I see more prevalent with the younger folks. There's some just unbelievably talented younger folks, and making them live within the boundaries of the traditional organization is hard, though, because they want to march.
We probably deal with a lot of regulations as well.
And yeah, we do, and they want to march to their own drumbeat. And to the extent we don't understand that and listen to that and enable that in a good way, we're missing opportunities. So I'm thinking about Salil and Nate in our organization. These 2 guys are unbelievable. And when they get together and they come in, they're in our digital team. So once a quarter we meet with these guys and they're talking and they're gibbering and they're so excited and they're showing stuff. Said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I have no idea what they're talking about. But we trust them. They haven't let us down. They live to our values. They're concerned about return on investment. And we gave them their own separate capital budget recently. I've never done that before. I mean, we got this big, rigorous capital investment structure, you know, that we want to minimize risk. They don't want to hear that. And so we had to bend a little bit to accommodate, and it's paying dividends like crazy, isn't it?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to open it up to the audience here. If someone has any questions, let me know. I'm going to come down. You can stay here if you want to go.
I'm fine here. Where do you want me? Kay's going to ask me a question. I've known Kay since late 80s, right, Kay? A long time.
I'm Kay Blom.
Yes, you are.
At Otterbein, and we worked together years ago, and I have to say that I really appreciate your leadership style because it's consistent all the way today, all the way back to 85 when we worked. So thank you for that, and that's very inspirational. But my question is about nurse leaders. And, we have a stellar nursing and seizure program in Otterbein in partnership with Grant Medical Center. With the expansion of Ohio Health, where do you see our advanced practice nurses, nurse leaders, in the model of the Ohio Health system, since you're reaching out more into rural areas and lots of opportunities? Where do you see advanced practitioners in this model?
Would you mind if I asked Donna to answer that question? Donna's right over here. Would you mind? But she can answer it a whole lot better than I can. I hope you don't mind, Donna.
No, this is Donna Healy. Yes, Donna Healy, I'm the Chief Nursing Executive at Ohio Health, and Dave and I have worked together for 4 years, and we've probably been saying we'll be there for a long, long time. But in my role, I recognize that advanced practice nursing in today's world spans 2 areas of specialty. Nursing, to, of course, the Ohio Board of Nursing rules, the regulations around advanced practice nursing, and then it's the medical staff with whom they have a provider agreement with, or a single care agreement that guides their practice. And so it gets a little tricky. So advanced practice nursing, when I was a young nurse, were nurses who had more education, but they were really nurses, and they stayed in that nursing world. Now, what we're doing at Ohio Health is using them to support providers, to provide additional access. They talked about growth a lot. It's to provide growth. It's to provide the care for patients in rural areas where physicians may be harder to get. It's to support the throughput, making sure patients get the appropriate care in the right setting, right place, right time. And so we're using advanced practice nurses and providers, PAs as well, physician assistants, in ways that, 15 years ago I never would have thought possible. Does that answer the question, Ken?
Let me add a little bit to that. Thank you, Donna. So, healthcare is a team sport. And physicians historically have trained to be solo entrepreneurs and captain of their ship. And today's training of physicians is a lot different, especially in primary care, but it's going to all specialties. And with resources going to be increasingly constrained, physicians ought to do what physicians are trained to do, and nurses ought to do as much as they possibly can within the context of their training. And they need to work in teams. The captain's still going to be the doctor, but you should maximize the talents, capabilities, and skills of every person on that team. And if you do that, you can accomplish more collectively than it can individually. And we are increasingly moving to that model throughout our institution, both in the doctor's practice as well as in the hospitals.
Hi, I'm Ray Gold. Can you talk a little bit about servant leadership?
You said any questions?
No, I'm just trying to think of a good, coherent answer. A leader isn't a leader unless they have folks that follow. And to get people to follow, you have to understand what it is that motivates them, and what is it they need, what is it they want to do, and what is it that gets them up in the morning, and what is it they cry about, what do they laugh about. And the more you understand that, you understand you need to serve them for them to follow you as a leader. Being a dictatorial leader might work if you have ultimate authority, but that doesn't last very long. So if you want to move an organization, I believe you have to be a servant. You have to be a servant leader. It'll make you much more effective. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of turnover. And there's a lot of folks I know that have jobs like ours, have a lot of turnover. I think if you dig to the root of it, it's because they kind of forget the servant leadership part. Does that help?
Thank you. My name is Sarah Richards, and I work in enhancement services here at Otterbein. Thank you so much for coming. You had mentioned the book Gray, and my question is a little bit twofold. You also mentioned the leadership thing that you read every morning. And so what I'm wondering is if there are other books that either are what is part of that leadership you're reading every day, or if that's an email list, and what, in addition to Gray, would be the book that you would say you learned the most from and really helped you grow the most in your professional career.
You guys know what I'm going to say already, don't you? So there's an author by the name of John Maxwell that I've been following for, I don't know, 25 years. I found him to be the most helpful to me. Everyone has their own style. I like John Maxwell because he gets at the issues that I've talked about here. He's got a little spiritual basis to him. He went to Circleville Bible College, which is now Circleville University, is that it? Oh, Ohio Christian. He was a minister in Lancaster, and his job, he became really good at training pastors how to lead their churches, which has evolved into a leadership business, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's huge. And I think his books, and I've been to a few of his courses, and I helped edit a book once a number of years ago called The 360-Degree Leader. I find his stuff really good. There's a book that's called Everyone Communicates But Few People Connect, that I still keep on my desk from time to time, and before I meet with a group like this, I'll occasionally pick it up, and it's got tips in there as to how to deal with different size groups and how to connect. So it's multi-dimensional, but I think at the core of what I rely on, it's probably the Maxwell stuff. Donna?
I had something that Dave does. I'd like to add something that Dave does, but honestly, I think it's the best practice. He holds a book club for his leaders. I just take advantage of that book club. And one book that made a big impact on many of us was, and I don't know who the author is, but it's People Matter.
Mm-hmm. Chapman.
Who is it?
John Chapman.
And that speaks to the heartbeats.
What is it that you read every day?
It's a compilation of John Maxwell's stuff, and there's a message for every day of the week. And I've read one of them has a biblical basis to it, and that one's now taped together with Scotch tape because I read it every day for 10 years. Because every day, I mean, I can read November 15th today, and what's going on in my life, that message means one thing, but last year it meant something completely different to me. I've switched now. He's got one that's a little bit different, but it's a Maxwell book. It's broken down by day of the week, and that's when I read in the morning.
I think another thing that seems to be,
Mm-hmm.
anyone else want to try this a little marketing here, is a Spanish. So, we have one here.
My name's Steve Peters. My daughter is actually her first year nurse school in Riverside, and she comes home all the time just raving about her mentor.
Yeah.
Just raving about it. Absolutely love the job.
Yeah.
And the organization is so large, and I'm just wondering, how are you developing this? Is there like micromanaging going on with these people, or are you just finding good people and just letting them go? Because, like I say, I hear a lot of
So you just mentioned the thing that I have to work on, micromanaging. And no, I don't. I try not to. You have to let people run and let them grow. But if they understand what's important, and if they understand the values, and if you can, and if you get their hearts, that's how to keep a consistent culture in the organization. It's not one person's job, it's everyone's job. Do you want to say any more about that? Go ahead. Yeah. This is the person your daughter works for, ultimately. How do I feel liberal arts education fall into that? I think our higher education organizations are challenged right now. And a liberal arts education helps round out a person. I'm not sure it's going to be affordable for everybody to do that. In nursing, we only take bachelor's degree nurses now, right?
No, we take associate degree nurses, but we expect them to have a bachelor's degree.
Why do we expect them to have a bachelor's degree in 5 years?
Because the research demonstrates that the outcomes for patients who are cared for by a nurse who has a higher level of education are better in the acute care setting or hospital setting. Therefore, we, listen to the research. It's also a recommendation by the Institute of Medicine by extensive research, and that's why we do it.
I think that's probably better than the answer than I could ever give you, is the one that she just gave you. But I do think, and I've talked to Kathy about this, it's hard. It's hard with the cost of a liberal arts education. How many people can afford to do that? I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm really not. But we do know that those folks that have those do better.
It's a team approach here.
That's how it works.
Hi, Christine Miller, with the University of Human Services also. You touched on those up-and-coming physicians, the students that are today going to be our physicians of tomorrow, working in their own practices with their nurses and a team approach. Do you think that educational institutions are recognizing that and they're helping them to understand that instead of just going along and being the boss and such?
Some do, some don't. I can tell you one that does. 3 or 4 years ago, we have a really good relationship with Ohio University in Athens. They're easy to work with. We own the hospital in Athens. I got to know President McDavis very well. We do a lot of postgraduate, their doctors do their residency, come out of the medical school in Athens. We've got 320 residents 280 residents coming out of that school. And a number of years ago, they wanted to create a branch of their medical school here in Columbus. And it ended up in Dublin, really close to our hospital in Dublin. And they wanted to do it, they wanted to have the classes, they wanted to have the curriculum more current. So the doctors aren't trained just to be the captain of the ship. but to be the leader of a team. And the curriculum there is changing to do that. In fact, 3 weeks ago, our chief medical officer, some of their faculty, the dean of the medical school, went to Hofstra University in New York, which is, they have a partnership with Northwell Health System on Long Island, where they started a new medical school, and it's much more advanced than any thought we ever had about how to teach as a team. So I think you're finding medical schools to do that. I can't talk about the nursing practice, but I'm pretty close to the with this medical school deal, and it is a game changer. It's a game changer because those doctors are coming out with leadership training, and they're coming out as servant leaders, not the pain in the rear, big ego doctor that many of us know and understand and love. But
I think ultimately also that helps with the bedside.
absolutely.
It just makes them a much better position to go on with and helps.
You know, the physicians that make that transition from being isolationists to be part of a team where they can accomplish more collaboratively with others are reinvigorated. So I've been doing this, been doing this long enough now that I still have this practice of going to the doctor's dining room about once a week somewhere. Riverside or Grant, or I don't get to doctors that often. And it's been so interesting to kind of reflect about the conversations in those doctors' dining rooms over the last 34 years. And during the 90s, it was all about their surgery center or their scope center or how they're leveraging the insurance company. It was all about economics for a long time. And that was kind of a discouraging time. Today, you're hearing about some new procedure, the team they're on, the things they're accomplishing as part of the organization, how they're divvying up the work. And we kind of call that systemness for us. That's a weird word, but it's a way of portraying that in a larger organization where you have multidiscipline and scale, you're able to find a spot for everywhere they can find themselves and do what they want to do. And this notion of being a part of something bigger lights them up, lights them up. It's much more professionally satisfying.
Does anyone have any more questions? One more, we'll take the last one.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bishop, I'm a student here at Otterbein, and actually in the exercise science and health promotion side of things.
Oh, good.
More interested in like the wellness, but just curious what Ohio offers to on that side of the program.
Mm-hmm. I'll start with saying not enough, but then I'll say we're going as fast as we really can. So we have you ever been to the McConnell Heart Health Center? And that's a great spot. We just struck a deal with the YMCAs for Central Ohio where we're going to be their partner. We incent our associates to exercise. If people wearing a pedometer or something on their wrists, how much can they get if they do X number of steps during a year? $500. People can get a check of $500 at the end of the year if they do enough steps. That's not bad. Last year was $200-some thousand that they paid out for that. So there's a recognition on the part of consumers, that's us, that we increasingly have a responsibility for our health. And that we shouldn't be just going to the body shop to get fixed when we're not well. And I think that is being changed by the economics of healthcare to a certain extent. Most of us are in high deductible plans, and we know that we are going to be somewhat responsible for our healthcare spend. One of the challenges that we have as an organization is to connect with consumers before they're sick or injured. And that's a challenge for us, to try to figure out how to do that. It's a big shift. So these Nate and Salil, the guys I was talking about, the digital guys, they're helping us do that. They're helping us to connect, especially with the millennials. digitally to help maximize their use of wellness activity. You're in the right spot. You're in the right spot.